everybody for being here, and thanks to John and the Northwest Cooperative Development Center for inviting me to be a part of this series. This is great. John, if you don't mind giving me the host controls, I can and while John's doing that, I'll just share a little bit about myself. John gave the my quaint mouthful of a bio. I just realized I should probably shorten that. And but it's one thing that I think is probably helpful context for everybody if you don't know me already is that until recently I was the communications director at the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, and so I've been leading the work there and in coordination with our sister organization, Democracy at Work Institute, for 3 years now, and this is actually what I went to school for. So I've been working in all different kinds of design and media avenues for the last I don't know, 20 years, more than that. I remember feeling very old at some point. I was doing an interview with some like middle schoolers, and they're like, when did you start doing web design? And I was like, I think it was the year before you were born. So I feel like I've been doing this work for a long time. So I also am an improviser. So I am really excited to always keep kind of like conversation going back and forth. So, oh wait, John, can people not unmute themselves during this?
I'm not sure.
If it's okay with you, I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves. Okay, great. You should feel free to definitely use the chat, as John said, to ask questions, but you can also, if you have a question, unmute yourself and just ask it. I think these kinds of things work better when we're able to talk back and forth and workshop these things together. So just know that you can feel free to jump in and ask questions at any time. So can you see my screen okay? Maybe John, if you can give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. So, all right, so let's just dive in. I am going to, I'll preface by saying I don't know, I'm hoping around like 30 minutes of presentation, but then also plenty of time for questions and answers throughout and especially at the end. So with that, we'll just start. So what we'll do today is we'll do some settling. This is the settling in part. We'll talk a little bit about like what people hope to get out of today. So actually, while I'm explaining the agenda, I encourage all of you to just type in the chat or just type in the chat. What are you hoping to get out of today? And that will help me to course correct and make sure that I'm giving you all the presentation that you all want, right? So I have some kind of like big overview things in here, but it's also really helpful if there's specific things that you all want to learn about. Like I really want to learn about social media a little bit more than like video editing, or I want to talk about communications planning more than anything else. Those things are really helpful. So please do use the chat and let me know what you're hoping to get out of today. So and so we'll talk a little bit about like, what does your organization actually need? So helping us to understand, depending on what kind of organization you're working with, what kinds of tools you should be making use of. So we'll talk a little bit about some design tools, some tracking and communications in there. We'll touch on social media, a little bit of public relations, teamwork, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So thank you so much to Frank and Vinny for jumping in. I am realizing I do know of a texting service campaign. I didn't have that in this slide deck, but I'll try to remember in the back of my head the texting organization that I recently met that should be able to help. But we can actually just talk about it as well. So cool. All right. So with that said, I'm not going to do the asking you all to write in here, like what questions do you have, but I will just say continue to add into the chat what questions you have. And we'll get to them through due course. One thing that I really like to start off with is what does your organization really need? So I think a lot of times people feel beholden to kind of like the times and whatever the current fad is. Like everybody thinks, oh, I have to be on Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and Twitter and LinkedIn and all these different kinds of things. And it's just not true for a lot of organizations. What you're seeing now is an exercise that I did with our staff at the Federation, just to talk about like what are the specific ways that avenues through which we communicate, and just taking a time with the entire team, not just the communications team. I know for a lot of you the communications team is probably just you. And I definitely know how burdensome that can be, because I kind of feel communications is a role that feels like it's, all the time. You always have to be on. You always have to be thinking about, like how do things look and how are things being communicated. So what you're seeing here was an exercise that I did with our members, and or not our members, I'm sorry, our staff. And it just kind of shows like, crowdsource, like what are the different ways that you all check in with people. And so you'll see, we have information packets, we have technical assistants, some people interact with members only through invoicing, some people specifically work through Twitter. And not you probably can't expect all of your staff to be on social media, but some are, and it's good to know who those people are. So I'm just seeing a note here. This is being recorded right now, so it will be posted on NWCDC's website. So you'll certainly be able to access all of this, including my slides, which I'll share with John a little bit later. So anything that you see here, you don't have to worry about taking like notes or things like that, because you'll get the slides. Cool. So I would just highly suggest, take some time with your staff, and whatever the people that you're working with, your team, and do this together, and just talk about like how are the ways that we're communicating out right now. And it helps people to think about like what kind of ownership they can take in the process of creating content. I'm seeing a lot of questions in here about like, like how do you create like small marketing videos, and how do you like create systems and automate some things. So I think that is this is a really good first step. And this is I actually just had people jump into the Google presentation and just like add in their own notes. So I'll share this just as a template for you. So what the next kind of step in like what do you really need that I think is helpful is looking at your industry. So I see a lot of familiar faces and some new ones. So it looks like there's a mix of people that are actually in business, and some people that are in kind of like either the TA space or lenders. So I think that it's helpful to look at whatever your industry is and look at like what are other people doing. So what are your peers doing? So periodically I will just take an hour or two and just look at like what are other, in our case, what are other membership organizations doing? Like what do their websites look like? What are their social media platforms look like? How are they engaging? So that I can learn and iterate, because even I'm seeing, somebody asking about, what's the current state of affairs in social media? And that's just a thing that you kind of only are able to soak in as much as you're paying attention to it. So there's never going to be like one article that you can read that's going to tell you everything. But if you kind of just look at your industry and see what people are doing, and then sometimes I will also spend time and think about like what are my inspirations? What are the things that I feel most engaged with on social media, even through emails or through video presentations? Like what things have really resonated with me, and what things do I keep holding on to? So just a quick example is that recently, last weekend, the Black National Convention was held, and that was all online. It was all on YouTube, and they had a resource kit. They had a page that's just like, here's downloads, here's some coloring pages, here's some recipes that I thought was really cool. And we actually just almost immediately turned that around, and we're like, we should do something like that for the Worker Co-op conference, which is coming up next week. So we're working on pulling something like that together. And you know, I've seen a couple of different people do sort of kind of like here's a fun thing in coordination with our events, because we're all online now, unfortunately, and we're always trying to figure out ways to be deeply engaging. So I encourage all of you to kind of like look at your industry, see what people are doing, and like always carve out that time, because it can be very easy to get lost in the sauce of doing communications. So this is an infographic that I found that's been really helpful. It's a little bit outdated now, but I think it's still a pretty good litmus. So, you know, when you're choosing different social media platforms, things that are good to help, like good ways to think about things are like, on Facebook, people are like building relationships a lot. I mean, there's a lot of marketing that goes on there, but if you notice, a lot of what you see in your Facebook feed really has to do with the people who are in your friends list, right? So the things that'll rise to the top are the things that are being shared by your friends. And so it's helpful to encourage other people to share information on Facebook. So if you have a specific constituency, so if you're a restaurant, inviting people who order your food to share pictures on Instagram or on Facebook is really helpful, because it helps people to it helps to kind of like make sure that it's seen on those platforms. Twitter is really great for like news articles, conversation, public relations, some like quick snippets. It's better if you're trying to pump out a lot of information. It's a good way to like keep people informed. So I would encourage you to just kind of like really evaluate like how are people using platforms, and that's always going to be true no matter what the current set of platforms is, right? One thing, and this kind of let me see, this gets a little bit to some of the questions that are coming in, like about, you know, like you have a one person comms team, right? So what do you need to do in order to prepare people? One thing that's really helpful is having a really basic branding kit, and it doesn't need to be thorough. You know, I've seen branding kits that are 30 pages long. I don't particularly think that those are helpful, but I do think it's really helpful to have standards and templates. So this is a logo that I did for my my food co-op in Philadelphia, and so I just have in here like, here's the colors that we normally use. Here's the logo. Here's how it should be used. This isn't the full kit, but it's, you know, here's the fonts that you should be using if you're making something on your own, because I think no one person is ever able to keep up with the amount of communications that need to go out. It's always going to outweigh your capacity, right? I've never found that to be not true in any comms role that I've held. I also have, you know, like our letterhead for our organization. So especially in this world of Google Docs, it's really helpful to have just like, here's the letterhead, please use this. There's already formatting in there. It's helpful. So if you just kind of stick to that. So it's really about equipping your team. This is a toolkit that we actually created for the Worker Co-op conference next week. And this is, and if some of you probably have even gotten this, but it's a promo toolkit, because, you know, people, as you know, like you've probably heard people say like, can you share this, or can you talk about this job posting or this event that's coming up? The way to actually get people to do that, and to get, you know, your customers to share information about you, or your partners to do that, is to create that information for them. So this is a toolkit that has on the left-hand side is kind of just some instructions, like this is about the conference, this is like what we're hoping for you to do with it. And then the second page is sample posts, like here's a Twitter post, here's a Facebook post, here's a post that you can put, here's a blurb that you can put in a newsletter. So those things are really, really helpful. And can be, I have noticed whenever we make a toolkit, that's the easiest way to get people to engage. And so I see a couple different questions in here. So I'm not gonna stay too long on these kind of design tools, but I will just share a little bit about them for you. So if you are, let me see, like someone in here that said, like, you know, what if we're a one person comms team? Using these tools like Canva, Stencil, Photify, they're very easy and usually free. There's a free version of them. The tools to be able to create really engaging like social media posts or informational posts, and it's really just plugging information into a template. So I encourage you to make use of those. If you're trying to make an infographic, a lot of people do like something like an annual report, or you're trying to share like data points. And I found that Easily and Infogram are two, there's a free version of both of them, and you're able to share out, like you're able to create kind of like engaging looking infographics out of those. And I will actually share a different window now that will help you see what that looks like. So, so this is a sample from Infogram. It was one that was like celebrating Women's Day, and so they just created. It's pretty simple actually. There's pretty simple images in here, just a little bit of a blurb. But this is super engaging, right? They have templates for like with maps of the United States, of the whole world. You can zoom in, and this is actually very little effort. I have made these in maybe the space of like 20 minutes, just like really, really simple infographics. And it looks really nice, right? It looks pretty polished. It looks like you spent a lot more time than you probably actually did on them. And it's also pretty interactive too. So you can create like charts based on like little data points that you have. And it just kind of gives it a little bit more of a polish on what you're doing. So I encourage you, let me see, I actually got this from, this is the best examples at Infogram, so it's infogram.com. And it gives you a ton of different examples. This is kind of what I'm talking about, and like making sure that you keep yourself fed in terms of like, what are people doing? What do things look like? I often just kind of look at examples and think like, oh man, this is really nice. In terms of like how we're able to, you know, display information in different ways. So let me see, and just creating like learning opportunities. I did a sort of a similar training with the New Economy Coalition's communications group. And if you're not a part of the New Economy Coalition and you're kind of like into the like solidarity economy work, I would encourage you to join the New Economy Coalition and join the comms team, because we meet, you know, usually every month or every other month. And we just share information. We share tips and tools. Last time I did a training on Airtable, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And it's really good to be able to bounce things off of other communications people. Yes, Rebecca, it can be embedded into a website. So I think there's different tiers about what you can and can't do with it. I think you can still embed, but it might just have the Infogram logo on it. So, so yeah, I see that Jillian is also asking about like, so making websites. I think I didn't have this in the presentation, but I would point people towards WordPress as a really easy way to create websites, or Squarespace, which will host everything. You can also sell things on it, and it's a really low cost option. Burning through a couple of tools here. One, so, you know, if you are the kind of person that, or the kind of organization that's trying to do video work, one thing that I've found is really, really cool and helpful is a service called Magisto. And there's several out there like it. So if you just look up like cheap video tools, this is a video that I made that is just made up of pictures that I had gathered from our members' Instagrams. And like I did literally no editing to this. All I did was say like, here are, actually I'm gonna turn this down because it seems like it's pretty loud. But I uploaded, I think like 30 photos to this program, and then I just hit edit and it just created this entire thing for us. Shout out to NWCDC, I think that was Fred. That's Diane. This is Olympia Food Co-op. So this is just like a really cool, like people loved this video, and it's literally just like 30 photos that I uploaded and then hit edit. So there's some amazing tools out there that are available to you if you just kind of spend some time hunting around. So, yeah, one thing that I'll also, let me see, I'll shout out is there are many co-ops that can also help you with this work. Design Action Collective in the Bay Area, Story 2, that's, I think, it's in Washington, right, John? Yeah, okay, cool. So, Radicante, which is based in Philadelphia. There's a bunch of different cooperative design houses that are available. You can, on the Federation's website, you can look under our referral directory. I think it's either referral directory or service provider directory. And you can find people that do kind of design work that can, even if they're not doing the work for you, they can consult with you and help you to understand a little bit more in depth. So, and okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about planning tools, and then we can get into some like Q&A back and forth, and I can answer some of these questions more directly. If you don't already use something like Hootsuite or Buffer or Airtable, I really encourage you to look into those tools. So, you know what, Kevin, I don't know if there are any cooperative social media agencies. I do know, I think that Story 2 would be able to help at least do some of that planning out of things like that. I actually can't think of any that specifically do that work, but that's a great question. If I think of any after this, I'll make sure to pass them on to John. So what Hootsuite and Buffer do is they allow you to post, to like prepare social media messages. So a lot of organizations that I've been with, we've actually planned out social media messages for an entire week at a time. So you just take like an hour or 3 hours in the beginning of the week, and then schedule out posts for the rest of the week. And that's really helpful to keep people like focused, and then you can kind of just like take care of it in like a bucket of time, but still maintain a presence throughout the week. One thing that I have found really helpful is this thing called Airtable, and I'll just actually switch. Oh, you know what? I think I have some of this in here. Okay, so I hope that you can see this okay. Maybe, no, you know what? Maybe I will just switch to the actual tool. So at the Federation, we use this thing called Airtable, and this is how I do a lot of the comms planning. We actually just hired a comms coordinator, so we're working on like increasing our capacity and creating systems for us to be able to like work on things together. So what you're seeing here is like, these are webinars that we have coming up, and we fill out all this information like within this planning tool, and then we're able to track what track what's like. So you'll see here, it's like, these are webinars that are tentative, there's ones that are posted, here's ones that are completed, or I actually, this is kind of cool. So I have this like completed open for evaluation. So I have, it's like a system that I won't get into in depth, but if during the Q&A, if you want me to walk through it more, I can do that. But basically the way that I have it is I have one evaluation form for all of our webinars. And then I actually, let's see. So I have this survey, and I fill out, like, here's a survey that's for all of our webinars. And then you can actually add in like this is a database that depends on different tabs in order to feed information. So these webinars are the same ones that are listed in this other tab. So I'm able to like choose which ones I want to have open for evaluations and then which ones are closed. We can track information like times and dates and planning tools in here. So it's sort of like if you've ever used Google Spreadsheets, then or Excel, it's basically a pumped up version of Excel, so you can have information refer to each other. So for instance, we have our e-news coming up, and in here I track like what kind of email is going out and like what do we need to spotlight. And I think those things are really helpful to make sure that like multiple people can like look and see what the schedule is. We also just like, it's like calendar, so we can see like when emails are going out. So I think it's really helpful to like have tools where people can look at things in different ways. So so those were a couple of kind of just like management tools. Let me see. Yeah, those were kind of like I wanted to kind of hit on a bunch of different kinds of facets of things. So I'll actually just stop sharing for the moment and I'll open up to questions. People can unmute themselves if you want. You can ask me to go in a little bit more in depth into anything specific, and I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, I can just start off by trying to answer a couple of these questions that are sticking in here. Yeah, Connor, you know what? I would have to look it up. I made that guide a long time ago, but let me see. I think if you actually look up like brand guide examples, I think it's actually pretty easy to find different examples. So if for some reason, I forget, here is actually what like an example. There's like a couple different examples. I'm not a huge Bacardi fan, but if you scroll down to Bacardi, I think something that is basically, it looks like what I have as the Kensington one, is it has like different versions of the logo. Like, this is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. Here's the colors that you should be using. Here's the fonts that you should be using. So I think it's really helpful to just kind of like look at a couple different examples to see like what your exact team means. So let me see. Vinny had asked in here, what are the best ways to market an internet-based co-op? Vinny, I wonder if you're able to just share a little bit more about about your co-op, and maybe we can even kind of like do a little bit of brainstorming right now. Are you still here, Vinny? I can't actually see. Yeah. Okay. Well, Vinny, if you can, if you're around and you can unmute yourself, feel free to jump in. I think what I would say is that an internet-based co-op, which is, I think, oh, okay. Sorry, you should be able to unmute yourself. Oh, there you go. Okay, I've turned it on.
Okay, how about that?
Yeah.
You got me? Do you have me now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, what we have is an internet-based co-op. The company is called Zero Dark, and we provide privacy technology, right? So, for example, right now, everything you post on the internet, gets read by Google or read by Facebook and whatever. And we create tools that let you own your own content. So the people I'm looking to market to are folks who want to control their content. This is as simple as, so there'll be developers who create apps. They use our tech to secure the stuff, right? And it can be wide ranges of things. There's a person who's building an app that's a period tracker, right? Because her concern is that she doesn't like the fact that the companies that do period tracking market to you. Or I have another person that's doing something for a school where they can capture whiteboards and then make comments on the whiteboards. And they want to keep that relatively secure because they might be involved doing intellectual property in the future. And the whole thing came about because we had a guy that went off and designed some sneakers, put them up in Dropbox, and found them in Walmart 10 months later because Dropbox got hacked by the Chinese regularly and it got stolen and copied and there was no recourse. So anyhow, our tech is basically, hey, we want to focus onto people and say, you want to own your internet? We have tools for it.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I think, like I was saying a little bit earlier, I think it's like figuring out who your audience is. I wonder how familiar people are with the business model canvas. But I'll type the name in here, but canvas. One thing that I always find really helpful is to actually just go back to kind of like, this is a business thing, but going to the business model canvas to finding like who your people are. So I think like in your scenario, Vinny, you're wanting to talk to people who are very conscientious about privacy. And I think it's just like figure out, where do those people go? So one thing, and maybe I'll give a shout out to Frank Cetera, from one of the New York State SBDCs here, is that SBDCs are really helpful. Small business development centers are really helpful at figuring out like doing like market studies and things like that. But I think it's like what I would say, if I was just giving you direct advice, I would say like, oh, well, a lot of people that live in kind of like the new economy space are really into that kind of stuff, and people that that are kind of like invested in like privacy issues. So, like I would get to know the New Economy Coalition and promote via their listserv. And, I think a lot of it is just showing up in those spaces and making sure to make sure that your information is ready, available. I would also tell you to look at, let me see if I can find it. There are, so if you're working on, particularly on Instagram or on Twitter, there are hashtag generators. You can actually do research on hashtags to see what people are what people are using. So like for your instance, I would look up like hashtag privacy on Instagram or on Twitter to see like what kinds of people are using those hashtags, because usually they kind of like it helps you to see what are the kinds of people that are interested in this work, and then using those hashtags in your posts. And that will kind of like help you to enter the conversation and be kind of like attached to that conversation. So, for instance, worker co-ops are not super well known in the US, and they are, so like if I were to use the hashtag worker co-ops, it's not actually that helpful because not a lot of people are searching for that. So what I will do is I'll add like hashtag small biz or hashtag leadership. So searching kind of like around where you're at. Vinny, you can unmute.
Sure. So one comment I have is that, we've been doing this a little bit, and we've used Facebook and, Twitter, and I would probably argue a bit of a few of the other mechanisms. The problem with things like Facebook, particularly ads, is we keep discovering that a lot of that is bots. Okay, people who you think are actually, really when I start to do the analysis, I come back recognizing that a lot of what, for example, Facebook says or views turns out to be bots. Man, that is so true for stuff like Instagram, and TikTok and stuff. These are, and the deeper you get into it, the more frustrating it is, because you realize that the whole point on their side is for them to advertise and make you think that you're being successful, when I really wonder how many people are actually reaching. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's why I started with kind of like looking at like, if you do some searching in those hashtags and find out like who are the people, like I would look at like who are, you know, the groups of people that work. So like if you were to like for my case, right, like I have searched like hashtag small biz just to learn about small business work, and through that I will see like, oh, here's like a conference that is going on, and maybe I should get in touch with that conference, because I think you're right. Like I personally am very distrustful of like algorithms in social media platforms. So I think while it's one way to reach people, I don't count it as the main way to reach people. So like, you know, I was suggesting New Economy Coalition's listserv because I think that's really, it's a place where people are looking for that kind of information. And it really just needs to be centered on like human, you know, human interaction. It's more about like building relationships with people and building that trust, especially for an industry like yours. So, I wonder if there's any other questions that are coming up. I know that there's like, it seems like there's a couple of people here that are like one person shops. So I think if you have particular questions, I can like dig into those.
I'll jump in with a question.
Hey, Rebecca.
I am finding that I'm just doing a lot of tasks that I think could be automated, but I don't really have a clear way. And the Hootsuite thing is really helpful. I've done that recently, and that's been a break. But do you have other ideas around automation? I know your Airtable presentation from the NEC Coalition was awesome, and I need to like really dive into that more, but do you have other ideas of things that have saved you time or energy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just repeat for Connor's benefit. Yes, the recording will be posted along with the slides, so you'll have that information. But the one thing that I'm not sure, I think you were there for this part of it also, Rebecca, but I'll share here again, is this this software called Zapier has been really helpful for automation. It's amazing. So you can actually, this program or application, I guess is probably a better word. What it does, it connects applications to be able to automate certain things, right? So you can have something trigger, like basically like when you get an email, it will cause an action to happen, and it'll go to like a different thing. If your organization uses Slack, something that I know that NEC does, and like I've done in different organizations, is, you know, when somebody posts in a Slack channel, it will go directly to Twitter, so you don't have to keep switching applications. Things like that are really, really helpful. I'll show you really quickly. So I have this articles thing. So this is how I track articles for the Federation about worker ownership, things that I think are important to record. So you'll see in here, there's right here, we have a title. This is like the name of an article. This is where it's at. This is the actual source, the name of the source, a little bit of an excerpt. And one thing that maybe you can see now is you'll see a little bit lower, I've been refining this new thing like tags. So the thing that's pretty cool about this is like, this is where I track articles that we want to promote. But you'll see this column, it's called publish. And if I click yes here, then it actually shows up at the Federation's website. So you'll see, actually I'll go back here. So, you know, this buying hand sanitizer from Black queer-owned businesses. So I put this into the Airtable, and then it automatically updated our website to have it post there. So I have a lot of automated things happening through Zapier. I think it does cost a little bit. There's a free version. There's an upgraded version that does cost a little money, but I do think it's really, really worth it, because it does help to kind of keep like automation happening and things like that. So I think that's definitely one way. One other thing that I would point out is that I often think about what where information is going, right? So you know, and it does actually take a little bit of planning to actually just sit down and think like, okay, so let me actually see. Okay, so recently our executive director went to Baltimore, right? And this was a trip with some policymakers and some community organizers to understand kind of like what the solidarity economy looks like in Baltimore. And so what happened was, you know, before Esteban went on this trip, I said, like, please make sure to text me pictures. And then as you're texting it, text me who's in the picture. And then afterwards, we did a really quick interview with him just to, we just got on the phone with him for less than 5 minutes and said, like, can you just talk about this experience? And that's where all of this came from, was just like a real, like, because, you know, it's kind of hard to get somebody to write up anything, but it is pretty easy to hop on the phone for a couple minutes, learn what they're doing, and then say, so I took this and I turned it into a blog post with a picture, and then it's that also translated like directly to we took that same content, like I'll take like a little bit of a clip here, and then if you go to our Instagram, it's on there. So it's like kind of like looking at like what's a piece of information we have, and then just thinking like, okay, what are the things that need to happen in order for that to, like, where does that need to go? So I'll go back to the this really quickly. The way I have this database set up is that we have our e-news that are coming up, and if you look in this grid view, we have like, okay, I plan out here like what is the thing that needs to be spotlit, and then what other things need to be highlighted, and so we kind of have it. I have it kind of like organized so that we can add in what things need to be featured, and then that hooks up with another tab where we can actually just like keep track of information. So it just helps to figure out like, is this going to Twitter or Instagram or to our e-news or a blog? So I think that's helpful. I hope that helps.
That is helpful. Like, those ideas are really helpful. Thank you. And I'm guessing when you say like you talked to Esteban on the phone and then you typed it out, I'm guessing, or the person who talked to them on the phone typed it out, and then, or did they, okay, and then put it in Airtable and then zapped that over to your website, that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
One super quick hack. I just realized I wasn't sharing my screen for that. I was actually clicking around to things and I just realized you couldn't see it, so I apologize if that was a little bit confusing. But I'll share this screen really quick just so you can see the article that I was talking about at least. But one like little hack that I have found that is really helpful is, you know, on and you know, I will caveat and say like I'm not fully abreast of like all the privacy concerns attached to this. I'm sure Vinny would have some thoughts around this, but if I'm trying to record someone, sometimes I will like I used text speech to text a lot on my text messenger on my phone. So I will actually just like click the microphone button, and then it will automatically record. It'll start translating what I'm saying into words. So if you've ever used that for a text message, that's also a thing that I use when other people are talking, with their permission, of course. But you know, if you just record it, it'll actually start typing it all out, so you can actually get around a little bit of the actually having to type everything out. And I have found that that's really helpful in terms of just like creating content pretty quickly, with like very low resources.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, of course. So let me see. I wonder if there's any other questions out there. Let's see. Good tips from Vinny. As long as you meet the state's privacy laws regarding recordings, it doesn't make a difference whether it's typed out or not. It's the same as having stenographer notes. So yeah, I mean, I do want to caveat we should be very careful about recording. We should not be recording people without their knowledge and consent. But it is just a helpful way. I'll even do it with myself sometimes if I'm trying to like type out a tweet or something, but I just don't feel like typing, or it takes a lot of care to do that. One thing that maybe I'll share is, you know, for the conference that's coming up, we already know there's a lot of information that we need to share out. So I'll just, you should be able to see it right now, but we already have timed out, like, this is where we're going to post to Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Slack and Twitter. And it's helpful to actually have as much as you can ready beforehand. The things that I find are most tricky during any kind of live event really has to do with like trying to gather information at the last minute, and those things are really difficult to do. You know, when you're trying to you know, like help people start a webinar, and then also you might be facilitating, or you might be just trying to like post things in social media, but getting things ready as much as possible early is really helpful. So we just have completely planned out already what we want to be promoting. And then one other tool that is really, really helpful that I found is, so, you know, if you, this is our Twitter profile, and then we keep Twitter lists. And so, oh, these are my lists. Let me see. So if you go to this federation, and then let's see, look at view lists. So on the federation side, we have like, these are all of our members. These are New Economy Coalition folks. We actually subscribe to theirs, but we actually like have a list of all of the members in the federation that have Twitter accounts. We make a plan to update this. Everyone, actually, it's pretty sorely out of date right now, but we actually just look through here to see, like, oh, these are people who I want to keep up with, and we can see really quickly what people are doing, and be able to just kind of like skim through information really quickly. So I highly suggest like making use of Twitter lists as a way to just to like keep up with people, whether it's like your constituents or people that kind of like you're looking to for information. It's a really good way to keep track of kind of like what's the temperature of things. Even I think answering the question about, you know, like what's the social media, like, you know, what's the current state of affairs of social media. One thing I think is kind of interesting is to just like make a list of people that you look up to, and like, you know, people that you think they do a good job in media making, and then just follow them to see what they're doing.
Well, I have a question. And, I'm wondering, like, what for larger co-ops, they might be able to actually pay full-time position, but for smaller co-ops, what would you think would be sort of the minimum amount of time that that they should put in to really get sort of a good effect out of this? And where should they really concentrate if they have limited hours or resources?
That is such a great question. So I think for a co-op with limited time, I would say you should spend, I would set aside at least 3 hours a week for what is, it really depends on your industry. So maybe um, I'm just picking one of our members that I think does a really good job. But I think it's really helpful to think about like who your audience is, and like what the content is that you're trying to drive people towards, to figure out how much time you should be spending. I think a good rule of thumb is if you're spending at least like 3 hours either like getting information ready to be shared, or actually posting information, or looking to see what can be like retweeted and shared. I think 3 hours is a good amount of time. I usually set aside more to work on our e-news, because it is really important for us, right, to plan out what we're going to talk about in our e-news, because you only it's good to think about like what are the milestones that you need to hit. For instance, right now, right, we have a member meeting coming up in October. So I will look at the calendar for the next 2 months and say like, okay, I know this member meeting is coming up. So what do people need to know beforehand? So I think a good rule of thumb is for any event that any milestone or event that you have coming up, look at the calendar 3 months in advance and see like, what's the information that needs to be shared out? And then it actually cuts down the day-to-day amount of time that that you have to spend, because you're planning ahead and getting ready for it. So I also very much encourage people to keep track of what you're doing, and make archives of things. So for instance, for our e-news, I track, usually for emails, there's a link that's like, view this in a browser. So I keep a file of all of those links, so I can look back and see like, what did we talk about last March, and what did we talk about last June, so that I can either, if there's evergreen activities, you can refer back to information that you already sent out to either like copy it or make it better. I found that saves a lot of time. This is the third national conference that I've worked on, so I have definitely dipped back into what we've done in the last couple of years and just kind of like modified information, upgraded it. That can be really helpful. It's a very long-term game, but it's like if you are doing something once, like why not have a reference as you're moving forward? So I think the real key is going back to what I started out with, which is like evaluating what you need, evaluating the channels through which you're talking to people. I think it's really helpful to take track of what you're doing right now. So any given week, actually just write down in a notebook somewhere, like how much time are you spending on any one of these things, and then track that for a month and see how you're doing, and like see how much time you're taking. And then you'll be able to make an educated decision like, okay, we're getting a lot of traffic through our e-news, but we're not getting any traffic through our social media. So maybe we just actually need to spend more time on our e-news rather than email news. I keep saying e-news, but I hope it's clear that I mean email news. So you can actually evaluate through data over the course of time where you should be spending your time.
We have about 3 minutes left. If there are any final questions or thoughts that people want to share or ask.
Hey, Mo, I'm not sure if can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I don't know if this is going to be covered in another session, but like we're going to be mostly online worker co-op, like that's going to be like perennial tree and plant nursery, doing like mostly online sales, and we still have a year to our desired launch, but like in terms of just like building an audience and then getting people to actually like buy your stuff, like yeah, I'm sure that's a really long process, but where should we start to think about how to strategize to do that?
Sure. So I'm sorry, you said you tree planting. And
Yeah,
just, like,
trees and just herbs, perennial herbs.
yeah, so that is a really you've hit on this is one of my favorite things to follow on any social media personally, which is anything to do with planting or nature. So things that I have noticed is like sharing tips and tricks, like even if you're not like all the way set up, right? So what are some tips about like caring for trees or things like that? So it doesn't necessarily have to be about your co-op necessarily, as much as it's building up your reputation as a thought leader. And I think like thought leader sounds, I think, fancier than it ever needs to be, but some people also call it like influencer or whatever. But the point is just kind of like sharing like what are your interests as a group, as an organization, and reading. So participating in conversation, commenting on other people. I mean, that's kind of like Twitter and Instagram specific, but through whatever channel, sharing like here's guides, and here's like some information to help people like kind of get to know you. So you can still see my screen, right?
Yeah,
So this is a member Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, and they sell seeds, but they also have like growing guides in here that are it's like a wealth of information. So I think building all of that kind of stuff up is really helpful. One thing that I always really also really love is frequently asked questions. So anytime you have a question come in from someone, that's also an opportunity to like share out information. So keeping track of any questions that you get and then like spitting that back out on your website or on a post somewhere, that's really great ways to like be really efficient about the time that you're spending while still building up your profile.
Okay, I want to thank Mo and also to everyone who participated.
Thanks so much for having me, John. Thanks everybody for your time and attention.
It's great. Great. Thank you all.